Marshall.
You're watching SABC News live from Johannesburg. Your headlines this hour. The extraordinary SADC summit that took place in Harare in Zimbabwe has condemned the conflict that has happened in the eastern DRC.
We will be initiating stage 3 load shedding at least over the weekend, and then go back to conditions of what now we have come to call normality.
Eskom has implemented stage 3 load shedding. The utility says this is due to unexpected breakdowns at some of its power stations. A medevac plane carrying a child and 5 others has crashed in Philadelphia in Pennsylvania, leaving no survivors. State and local officials can also not yet confirm how many people may have died on the ground after the plane slammed into a heavily populated portion of the city. Good afternoon, thank you for joining us and welcome to the Week in Review. For the next 2 hours, we'll be reviewing some of the biggest stories of the week, stories that affect you and kept grabbing the headlines. My name is Mariketa Mtlabe, and as always, it's wonderful to have you with us. We start here. The SADC Extraordinary Summit held in Harare in Zimbabwe by regional leaders has condemned the M23 attacks in the eastern DRC. The meeting was aimed at discussing the DRC crisis. President Cyril Ramaphosa led the South African delegation in this meeting. SABC News international editor Sophie Mukwena has details.
They have taken a decision to send ministers of defense and some military personnel, the hierarchy, to that area to speak to stakeholders there to ensure that you are able to repatriate those soldiers who died during that fierce fighting, and also to be able to bring the soldiers who are injured to South Africa, particularly those that are from South Africa, for treatment, but also to ensure that you negotiate with all role players, including the non-state forces that are there. I think they are talking about the different groups that are operating in the DRC, including other neighboring countries, to find a way that there's a ceasefire and the talks do resume.
Meanwhile, Pretoria and Kigali are hard at work to clarify any misunderstanding between South Africa and Rwanda. This after Rwandan President Paul Kagame issued a strongly worded statement accusing his South African counterpart, President Cyril Ramaphosa, of distorting his version of the events unfolding in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo.
In an effort to avert a diplomatic fallout between Pretoria and Kigali, South Africa has stressed that President Cyril Ramaphosa's telephonic calls with his Rwandan counterpart, President Paul Kagame, were aimed at ensuring that the Eastern DRC achieves peace.
The context of the President's call was cessation of hostilities and fire. And there could be things that falls through the cracks, but the call itself, the reason the President called President Kagame was to engage him, to see reason. And they even agreed on the cessation of fire in the call.
Kigali has expressed its displeasure when it saw reports from South Africa.
Actually, those phone calls were cordial, and they discussed substantive issues without blame game or any accusation. In the first call, they discussed mainly about a solution to this crisis, and they agreed to have a broad ceasefire in the region and then direct talks between M23 and the Congolese government. And then yesterday they had a second phone call, which was also cordial, during which they talk about the situation on the ground And President Ramaphosa revealed that the SNDF soldiers were actually killed by the Congolese army.
Lamola responded to one of the issues that caused a tiff between the two capitals.
What I'm saying is that it could have been handled differently. It is always characterized as the Rwandan Defense Force. And even in terms of the expert reports of the UN that I'm referring to, there is enough literature to the effect that the Rwandan Defense Force does support the M23.
The Democratic Republic of Congo says it's working with a number of parties to normalize the situation in Goma.
In Goma, no one is in a good situation. And that's why we are working with international community to find a solution more quickly, because Rwandan army is committing massacre in the city. But what I've heard for the past days, we know that there is South African soldier inside, some years inside. We should thank them because they've been there, they've been very helpful in order to protect populations.
The World Food Programme is concerned about the lack of access for aid to reach Goma and surrounding camps for the internally displaced people, saying that people are running out of essentials. Meanwhile, the M23 group say they are fighting for their own survival in the Congo.
M23 did not attack South Africans. M23 is fighting for its own survival. South African came. I believe you have in your constitution that the South African soldiers could only engage in aggressive war if they were protecting their borders. I don't think it is that case right now. We are in Congo trying to survive, to fight a war that can bring our parents back home that has been in a refugee camp for 30 years.
Kylie Kumalo, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Now, EFF leader Julius Malema says South Africa does not have enough capacity to engage in warfare at the moment. Malema has criticized the government for keeping soldiers in the eastern DRC following the deaths of 13 SNDF soldiers. He was addressing EFF party structures in Bela Bela following its third National People's Assembly last year.
EFF leader Julius Malema has once more reiterated his stance regarding the ongoing conflict in the DRC. While Malema commended the SANDF soldiers who are deployed in the region, he has lambasted those who are responsible for deploying South African soldiers in that region.
The conflict in the DRC, therefore, does not require a head of state who suffers from a desire to be a hero at the expense of the lives of our soldiers without an appreciation of the condition that informs the conflict. It is when you do not appreciate the condition that inform the conflict in the DRC that you will speak in folk tongues when you speak to the president of Rwanda and communicate a different message to the people of South Africa. Lies have short legs, Mr. President, and we demand clarity from you because you have sent our soldiers to their death.
Malema is pleading for the safe return of the soldiers.
Bring our soldiers home because our army should not be a pawn in a game of capitalists which has now exposed the weakness of our military capacity. Bring them home because every day they pass away, we see the consequences of a deliberate destruction of our arms manufacturer Dinel, and we see the consequence of the year-on-year budget cuts to the Defense Department. Bring our soldiers home because they are the first line of defense for our people, not the first line of defense for the interest of capitalists and mining corporate. Mr. President, bring our soldiers home and desist from meddling in the affairs of DRC and Rwanda.
Meanwhile, the party's plenum brought party leadership structures with the sole purpose of finalizing resolutions taken during the party's third National People's Assembly last year.
Commissars and fighters, we are gathered here today after a successful third National People's Assembly, which elected the leadership collective and resolved on key tasks that must be achieved over the next 5 years. The plenum serves as a strategic meeting of the EFF that charts the agenda and program for the EFF for the year.
The party plans to implement some of its resolutions, including ensuring the implementation of the Bella Act, among others. The assembly will run throughout the weekend in closed plenary sessions. Katlego Nyoni, SABC News, Bella Bella.
Now, to take this further, we're joined by SABC News international editor, Sophie Mukwena. Sophie, thanks so much for joining us indeed. Can you just give us the latest on the impasse between the government and M23 rebels in the DRC?
There's not much interaction. In fact, there's none between the M23 and also the government of Kinshasa. What we have done is that we've spoken to both sides. I spoke to the Minister of Communications in that country, as arranged by the government of President Tshisekedi about this matter. They are talking about willingness to engage in talks. And they are saying that the Luanda process that is being led by President of Angola, they support that. But unfortunately, last year in December, when we were expecting that both President Tshisekedi and President Paul Kagame will sign a document, President Kagame had reservations and signing didn't happen. And then we saw the war intensifying and violation of that ceasefire that was brokered by President of Angola as a mediator or facilitator of the Luanda talks. On the other hand, you have the M23 saying, we are always excluded in these talks. What they do, it's all these people who are in government. It's the DRC government, Rwanda, and other stakeholders. But we, the people who are fighting and who are fighting for survival and recognition as part of the Congolese community in the DRC, they don't invite us to the talks. Therefore, that's where the problem is. You cannot say you are signing a peace agreement that will facilitate stability in a particular country or region by excluding important stakeholders, particularly the people you are about. In other words, for me, if you bring Paul Kagame and Felix Tshisekedi, it's about DRC and Rwanda. It doesn't necessarily address the issue of the DRC internal conflict.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, Sophie. But what does history teach us about these ceasefire agreements? I mean, this is not a new conflict. It's been happening over the years. Do you see the two parties as well sitting around the table, finding one another?
You need a strong facilitator or mediator with good understanding of this biggest war, second to the Second World War in the Congo, that has started many years ago. You need someone with that kind of institutional memory and history to be able to pull all these stakeholders together. You cannot start with what's happening now. You have to go back. And if you are not able to go far back, at least go to the Sun City talks, where South Africa spent so much money and time and resources to bring all stakeholders, all the warring factions in the Congo. Because it's not only M23. We always talk about M23. There are many forces in the Congo that are fighting for different issues from different parts of the country. Bring them together and facilitate a proper dialogue. Let the Congolese amongst themselves find a solution to this protracted conflict. If you don't do that, if you are selective and you impose external resolutions and solutions, you will continuously have this problem.
Yeah, and there have been calls for soldiers in the DRC to be returned home. Is that possible from what you are seeing, from what you're hearing, Sophie?
It's possible. It's possible. You have many options to do that. Right now, there's cessation of hostilities or there's a ceasefire. where the South African troops are not being attacked, neither are they attacking anyone. They are confined in the bases of MONUSC and the SADC force. Now, you have to negotiate a route to be able to go and pick up the remains of the soldiers and also evacuate those who are injured. How can you do it? You have options, either through Burundi, which might be costly because of the tension between M23 and the Burundian government, including the Rwandan government. You can use Uganda, much as we know that Uganda is involved. But for now, there are no accusations, heavy accusations leveled at Uganda.
Yeah.
Or you can use Rwanda. There you are guaranteed that that will happen speedily because you just have to negotiate with the Rwandan government. They can talk to the M23 because they talk. So that's the process, perhaps behind the scenes, after the meeting yesterday, where leaders will engage in. Because we are told that the summit has decided that the ministers of defense of countries that have contributed troops, that's Tanzania, Malawi, and South Africa, including the army generals, must go. I don't know which country, whether to the DRC, to Rwanda, to Uganda, or to the eastern part. You can't enter the eastern part. I don't know where are they going to meet to discuss these options. Whether they will go to Uganda. Uganda has been part of this because this is the Great Lakes problem. It's broader. It's the Great Lakes. Or they will go to Kinshasa. There's no way the M23 will go to Kinshasa. Therefore, I think you need a neutral venue. I don't know which one will be accepted by all sides so that you can talk and facilitate this process as soon as possible so that families can find closure.
And what's the position of SADC after that extraordinary meeting yesterday?
Well, a strong statement condemning M23, accusing them of being responsible for the death of these soldiers, including one Tanzanian, I think it's one Tanzanian or Malawi, and the other, whichever, but the other three are from Malawi and Tanzania. South Africa, you have 13, so it's 16 all in all. And therefore, they took a decision that they will put a blame on M23. Secondly, as I pointed out, this delegation that is supposed to go in the Congo to try and find a solution. The other issue is that they will be reinforcing, capacitating the soldiers because they are still trapped there, with another country, a member state, agreeing to help in terms of health needs. And also, for me, what was good was that they are now acknowledging that you have to speed up the peace process because it can come with a lasting solution. The guns will never resolve this issue. And it's sad because the AU has taken a decision to silence the gun by 2030. We are left with 5 years. Look now, look, the war is raging. And you come and you capacitate, you fight, you don't push for political solution. Therefore, that decision that was taken to silence the gun, you are actually violating your own resolutions as Africa.
And I know that SADC had something as well to say, Sophie. That was Elias Mokhosi. Just take us through that in terms of what he had to say amid this conflict.
Maybe let's listen at what Elias Mokhosi said when he was reading the communique, emphasizing what needs to be done by the delegation that is supposed to go to the Great Lakes region to engage all stakeholders so that you are able to repatriate the soldiers who passed on and also those who are injured. Let's listen in.
Summit called for the immediate dispatch of ministers of defense, chiefs of defense, and troop contributing countries to DRC to ensure the SAMI DRC troops are safe and facilitate immediate repatriation of the deceased troops and those who are injured. Summit called for an immediate joint summit of SADC and East African Community, EAC, to deliberate on the way forward regarding the security situation in the DRC as proposed by the 24th Extraordinary Summit of Heads of State of the EAC held on the 29th January 2025. Summit mandated the SADC Organ Troika on politics, defense, and security cooperation to engage all state and non-state parties to the conflict on a ceasefire process to protect lives and facilitate a smooth flow of humanitarian support to the people and communities affected by the armed conflict.
I think another important issue, you would recall that there was a meeting of the East Africa community, heads of state and government. It was a virtual meeting where they proposed that the two groups or the two blocks, that is SADC and EAC, must meet. And now it becomes a Great Lakes region matter, so that they can speak in one voice in trying to find a lasting solution to this. The president of Uganda, Museveni, even posted that on X, his account, emphasizing that. And I think he is doing this because he understands this conflict better. He was once with Kagame in the bush, including other leaders who were fighting for liberation in the Great Lakes region or in East Africa. And therefore, he understands this problem better. And Uganda is also involved. Therefore, I think that meeting will definitely help, particularly for those heads of state and government from both SADC and EAC who have no recollection or institutional memory in relation to this problem.
Sophie, a story that we'll keep watching closely indeed. We appreciate your time and insights. We greatly appreciate it indeed. Do stay with us as the Week in Review continues after this short break. Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. Now, the Minister of Electricity, Dr. Hossein Ramaphosa, says it is said that Eskom has to implement load shedding again after 10 months. Ramaphosa briefed the media where he announced that Stage 3 load shedding would commence for the weekend.
Minister Ramaphosa has expressed disappointment that load shedding has to once again be implemented. He has explained that the utility was forced to burn more diesel this week as reserves were depleted after some of their top power stations experienced breakdowns. In a hastily convened media briefing, the minister explained the series of events that led to this decision.
We had a situation where at the two of our best performing power stations really, Matimba and Letabo, where we had a number of units failing at the beginning of the week. So that's the second matrix in that perfect storm, and the third one was that there were other units that delayed in coming back. So as a result of that, what that meant is that for most of the week we had to rely on our open cycle gas turbines, essentially in layman's words we were burning diesel. Remember, the peaking plants are designed to do exactly that, to help us to be able to stave off the intensification of load shedding or the initiation of load shedding. So what that meant is that we ran those peaking plants and we exhausted, if you like, our reserves. We are at a point where, for purposes of protecting the grid and the integrity of the system, we need to maintain the reserve margin. So if you had to ask me, as we sit here, even during the peak, we have enough to support ourselves, but we don't have, we have depleted the reserves. So we have taken a conscious decision that we are not following records. So what is the record? Ideally, we want to say a year without load shedding. We are proceeding But no, that can't be at the expense of the system. Like I said, informed by prudent and judicious engineering consideration, and what are the expectations of the system operator, we say we will initiate load shedding.
It's really the incident that is not the normal, where we have on one day 3 units coming off, mainly because of the boiler tube failures. So we have started now with the repairs. The first unit, we're expecting it to come tomorrow. So, and we will be working over from tonight until over the weekend until mid next week to return some of these units, most of them by Monday, Tuesday. And also at Matimba, we have returned the first unit this morning. So there's still other units that still need to come back over the weekend at Matimba. That also came off. Those are the 2 big stations that had almost 6 units between them that are off. If you take their size, it's about 3,600 megawatts. So that's what is critical, that those units. And these are also two of our best stations as well. And then we also have some units at Kendall and Krill that we will also start returning over the weekend.
On Thursday, energy regulator NERSA announced that it had granted Eskom a 12.7% tariff increase for the 2025-2026 financial year, which will kick off from the 1st of April this year. This is lower than the 36% that Eskom had initially applied for. Board Chairperson Mteto Nyati says this is the reality that Eskom has to live with.
We have accepted as Eskom the reality. This is the reality that we've got. We are disappointed, of course, but this is our new reality. Like all businesses, we are business leaders, we're business people. We need to now be able to live within this new reality. So our drive now is we have to continue to be profitable and sustainable within this new reality. That may change some of the actions that we are doing internally in order for us to achieve that objective. So, but internally, the leadership team is clear. The focus now is let's continue to drive this business.
Eskom CEO Dan Marugane says his team's focus will be on getting the affected units back up.
This has nothing to do with any other thing. It's an operational matter. We are comfortable that we understand the root causes of it, and that our teams are actually focusing on resolving those and bringing them under the leadership of Becky over here.
Diabo Sito, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Now to this biggest story, perhaps one of the biggest stories of the week, the US aid program, which helps millions of people fight HIV and AIDS worldwide by supporting everything from clean water access to hospital infrastructure and children's health, has halted its funding. Donald Trump, the recently elected president of the United States, put a hold on foreign aid as his government pushes its America First policy. US aid has been one of South Africa's largest health programs. Serious questions, though, concerning how things will unfold going forward have been raised. Joining me now is Health Minister Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi. Minister, thanks so much for joining us here on the program, and thanks so much for your time and patience. Could you just take us through what this could mean for the future of HIV and AIDS treatment for South Africans?
Good afternoon, Marigeta. Good afternoon to the listeners and viewers. I think we need to be reading from the same page in order to understand what's going on here. Our problem in health is PEPFAR, the Presidential Emergency Fund for AIDS Relief, which was established by President George Bush somewhere around 2000, when AIDS was ravaging the world. Now, if I put the whole issue in perspective, you will know that out of our South Africa's population of 63 million people, 7.8 million are people who are living with HIV and AIDS. Now, because our country is divided into 52 districts, PEPFAR chose 27 most affected districts. That means the district with the biggest burden. And that's where PEPFAR is involved in the country. And that's where we're having a problem. It does not mean that the remaining districts are not having HIV and AIDS. It's only that they are not as high burden as the PEPFAR districts. Now the districts are as follows. 7 of them are in KZN, 5 in Eastern Cape, 4 in Gauteng, 3 each in Mpumalanga and Northwest, and 2 each in Limpopo and the Free State, 1 in the Western Cape, that's the Cape Metro, and 0 in the whole of Northern Cape. Now, the people who are on the ground in those 57 districts are 271,606 people who are working on the ground to fight this scourge of HIV and AIDS. 256,452 of them are paid for by the South African government. This leaves us with 15,154 people. That's where our problem is. That's where our problem lies. And that is the part we are going to try our best to solve. In terms of ARVs, we buy our ARVs on our own. 90% of all our ARVs, or the cost of ARVs, is paid for by the South African government. The other 10% is Global Fund, which is based in Geneva and is not affected by this. So on the buying of ARVs, we are not affected. What we are affected with are the 15,000 people and their operational, their operational cost. That is the one that we are faced with.
Yeah, which brings me to this next question, Minister. The halt is said to be for 90 days. Should it go beyond this? Will the country be able to sustain treatment for those who need it?
Well, the decision we've taken is that nobody should stop ARVs, because I'm sure you'll understand it will be extremely dangerous for individuals and for the country as a whole, for anybody to start ARVs and stop on the way, because then they develop resistance. And developing resistance means if you have to treat them, you must use more expensive ARVs and spend more money. But secondly, it means if you start having people who are whose HIV/AIDS is resistant to treatment, when they spread it to other people, it means they are spreading HIV resistant to ARVs, and that's very dangerous. So we are going to make sure that that doesn't happen, and we are likely to achieve that, because as I told you, the ARVs are bought from our own money, 90% of them, and the other 10% is Global Fund, and Global Fund is not affected by this. So if after 90 days everything stops, it's a question of 15,154 people who are paid for by PEPFAR. What do we do with them? And that's the part we're discussing with Treasury.
Minister, has the South African government engaged with the US government or administration to reconsider this decision, though? And if so, what has been the response?
Well, the US government, through their embassy in Tshwane, conducted us only on Friday, asking for a meeting. That meeting is going to take place on Monday, and it's only then that we'll know what actually is on. Before that, there was never any engagement and there was no information, save the information we get from the NGOs who have been told to stop and written again told to continue for 90 days. So our first official meeting is on Monday, but unfortunately, the US doesn't have an ambassador yet in South Africa, but we're going to meet the embassy staff.
And are there any discussions with international donors or organizations just to fill the gap left by PEPFAR?
Well, up to so far, we have got many international donor organizations who are helping countries all over the world in whichever way. But as to replacing PEPFAR on this, because remember, donors donate money for a specific thing. So it's not that the world or the countries getting money only from PEPFAR. For instance, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is heavily funding programs around the whole world, including in our country, to fight polio and malaria. So we will discuss with them and see which way they go. But remember, the biggest global funder apart from PEPFAR is Global Fund, which was established specifically to fight HIV, AIDS, TB, and malaria, which is based in Geneva. And every 3 years, they've got what is called a replenishment round, where they sit and countries must come and replenish their fund. Countries, billionaires, business, philanthropists, whoever want to donate. And it so happened that this time around, that investment or replenishment round is going to take place right in South Africa. And I don't want people to believe we just going on in a begging bowl. We become part of this replenishment. For instance, in the Global Fund, we contribute. It's not that we just fold our arms. We contribute. The last time we contributed, it was 13 million rands. So it works like a stokvel of some sort, the Global Fund, whereby countries come together, put money, give it to Global Fund. Then Global Fund will look for countries with the highest burden. And they give me more money than countries with the lowest burden. But the contribution is according to your capacity. In other words, in terms of the strength of your economy. And so those are some of the things we are going to look at. But remember, these are early days.
Minister, I'm not insinuating anything, but should this fund cut go beyond the 90-day period, how will it then affect vulnerable populations? I mean, you mentioned areas or provinces that are mostly rural here. How will it then affect vulnerable populations such as women, children, marginalized communities who depend on PEPFAR supported funding or programs? And how are you planning to mitigate that?
Let me correct you about saying they are rural. The most affected areas of HIV/AIDS in the country are the metros, the Cape Metro, Ekurhuleni Metro, Joburg Metro, eThekwini Metro, Tshwane, and even Buffalo City. So it's not really much about rural end. And yes, so it even in our major cities it is. But as I said, in order to deal with this matter, it's not the Department of Health that can deal with it alone. It's money. We need treasury. On Thursday, I made a presentation at the Lekgotla, which you know is chaired by the president with the deputy president there. All the premiers were there, all the ministers, the whole GNU officials that were there. I made this presentation to them that this is what's happening, this is what will be needed. So it can't be for me only who will second guess the decision that South African government will take. I will have to wait for the whole government to decide that this is the way we have to move.
And how will the health department work with NGOs and civil society organizations that have been implementing the PEPFAR-funded programs?
Well, we have already discussed with quite a number of them. As I said, the only thing at them, and we've also, by the way, discussed with all the heads of HIV, AIDS, and TB in all the provinces. At the present moment, as the Department of Health, the only thing that we have decided, which we are watching over, is that nobody must stop taking ARVs. That's what the Department of Health is doing. The rest of the things, we have given it to the whole government. As I'm saying, the whole leadership of government was there. I made a presentation. I showed them the slides. I showed them the figures. I showed them the districts. Here, I'm only giving you the numbers of the districts and the number of people. If you have time, you wanted me to expand more, to give you even the names of the districts, I can do so.
All right, Minister, just in the interest of time, and I listened to you during the week, you said there's no reason to panic amid these developments. Is that so?
Well, I never used the word there is no reason to panic. I heard some, especially on in a SABC, what you call radio, saying the minister said we want it won't be heavily affect us. But at any rate, when you have got a crisis, you don't solve it by panicking. Even if I never use that word panic, but you don't solve any crisis by panicking. That has never happened anywhere in the world. You sit down with a cool mind and you see how to solve the problem.
Minister, thanks so much for your time and clarity. We appreciate it indeed. That was Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, Health Minister joining us to talk about the PEPFAR-funded program that has been cut for now, perhaps even for 90 days to be exact. The week in review continues after this short break. Do stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Football fans who will go to the FNB Stadium today to watch the Soweto derby between Orlando Pirates and Kaizer Chiefs have been urged to arrive early and use park and ride facilities. Pirates and Chiefs will meet for the first time in a Betway Premiership match this season in the most eagerly anticipated and most watched fixture on the local football calendar. Organizers have for the first time arranged park and rides to and from the venue to ease traffic congestion around the Nazareth precinct and make the experience a pleasant one for fans. Senior sports journalist Sifiso Ramara joins us live from Nazareth. Sifiso, a very good afternoon to you. How is the mood there? What are the fans saying?
Good afternoon to you, Makhateka, and good afternoon to SABC viewers. We've been here at the stadium. We arrived here around 11 o'clock in the morning, and the place was already buzzing. You know, this is one of the, in fact, it's the biggest football fixture in the country by far, and it's one of the most talked about derbies on the African continent. But let me bring in the fans. I'm with a gentleman here. He traveled all the way from Naisla in the Western Cape. He tells me they left a couple of days ago. My brother. So you are here today.
Yes.
You left Naisla. When did you leave Naisla?
Wednesday, 10 o'clock. I leave in Naisla, travel all the way, and then I land in Bloemfontein around 12:30, and then I stop Bloemfontein, and then I started Bloemfontein to Joburg, and then I go there where I'm booking a room, then I sleep there. And then from now I'm from the hotel now.
So you couldn't afford to miss this match?
Yes, of course, must be here.
Tell us about your expectations. What are your expectations this afternoon against your bitter rivals, Kaizer Chiefs?
No, it is obvious. All of the parties is win. You take it. This is our things, man. This is our things. I know 3-0. Yeah,
that's the confidence from the Orlando Pirates camp. Let's bring in the Kaizer Chiefs fans and hear what they have to say. My brother?
Yeah, no, my name is Godfrey. Yeah, today we're going to climb the lineage. Yeah, we're going to humble them today. And what I like about them, they tell us to eat before the game. But I don't know how about them. But today we're going to show them that the flying colors. Yeah, because we're Amakos for life. This one, they don't scare us, this one.
What makes you so confident, my brother?
No, you know what I can tell you, from like now, they say we are underdogs. But I like the way they say, because at the end of the day, but around 5, my brother, I know I won't see you from anywhere. I don't even gonna see you. Yeah. But what I can tell you guys, I don't give a benefit of the doubt from my players. Yeah, I trust them. Yeah. But the 3 points, we're gonna take the 3 points today.
Where?
Yeah, my brother.
I know the Pirates is very it's a very play. It's very good players. But today, I don't know what's happening. But the Pirates, I'm just sorry, Pirates.
Yeah, that's the confidence from the two camps. You know, I will quickly bring in the spokesperson of the Johannesburg Metro Police Department. He must tell us about, the plans that they have for this grand occasion. Mr. Fitla, welcome to SABC News. We know that you've organized park and ride facility for the very first time for football. Are football fans using that?
What we are seeing is that a couple of our fans are using it, but we'll get a true indication later on in the game when the buses start flooding in. But we hope that people do use these public transport options. It's not only park and ride. We've got Rea Vaya bus services. We've also got mini bus taxis, which is a favorite for the fans. But we've also got e-hailing services, the Ubers and the Bolts, with the designated drop-off and pick-up points here at the stadium. So use those options and you'll have a travel, a stress-free travel experience where you won't face any congestions with the designated routes that have been used for these public transport operations.
We expect about over 85,000 people in this precinct, in and around the stadium. Are you up to the task of handling whatever challenges coming your way this afternoon?
We are up to the task. Fortunately, it's not our first Soweto derby. We've handled a couple, actually a lot at this stadium. So we know the challenges. One of the biggest challenges, of course, is illegal car guards, which make the motorists park at wrong places, and also motorists parking at wrong places. And unfortunately, your vehicles will be impounded if you do. But we are looking in at the traffic situation at the moment. Vehicles are flocking in. And I'm proud to say that fans are heeding to the call. They are coming to the stadium early. And hopefully at 2 o'clock, there won't be any congestion outside of the game. And at 3:30, the game can kick off when it's scheduled to kick off.
And in most cases, congestion, it's a big issue. And by what we've introduced, surely going forward, that will try, in terms of alleviating that congestion problem.
Yes, with what we've introduced, surely this will alleviate the congestion problem. As you did say, that the park and ride is the first time we're using it for the soccer games, so we'll see how it goes. But if you're still at home and you want to come to the stadium and you've got a ticket, because tickets are sold out, make sure that you leave now and you avoid any possible congestion before the game. We know after the game it's impossible to avoid congestion. Everyone is leaving, but we have put in mitigating circumstances that will make sure that people do flock out as quickly as possible out of the stadium after the game.
Thank you very much. That's Mr. Fihla, the JMPD spokesperson, telling us about the plans that they have. But I must say that for now, everything looks good. The fans heeded to the call of arriving early at the stadium, and we hope that the match will kick off at 3:30 without any hindrances. But for now, it's back to you in studio.
Yeah. A celebration of South African football, culture and passion, that is Soweto Derby. It keeps inspiring generations of fans and players alike, ensuring it plays as one of the greatest rivalries in world football. Sifiso Ramara, the SABC News sports reporter. Thanks so much indeed. Now to this, Gift of the Giver says the level of destruction in Gaza is unprecedented in the region, and the scale of intervention will require governments and NGOs working together to rebuild. The International Aid Organization says it has hundreds of doctors ready to go to the area as soon as is possible. The organization, medical experts and activists gathered for a discussion on the near decimation of the healthcare system in Gaza.
The discussion followed after a screening of a documentary on the near destruction of the largest medical complex in Gaza, Al-Shifa Hospital. South African medical experts who have travelled to Gaza before says they have witnessed the impact of several conflicts, but this time it's on a scale so big it seems overwhelming. This despite international conventions to guard against this.
Healthcare workers are supposed to be protected under international law during conflict and unrest. Hospitals are supposed to be safe areas where the ill and infirm go to rest and receive respite and healing. Hence, by targeting healthcare facilities and workers, it is no secret that the mission is to annihilate a people by breaking down the places of safety, respite, and solace. Gaza has shone a spotlight on a global system that is historically flawed and now epically failing. For the people of Gaza, I have absolute respect for their sumud and resistance in the face of this beastly horror.
Rebuilding in Gaza will have to be rooted in Palestinian ownership and leadership. This according to Bob Bagri, who has worked in Gaza training students for a number of years. He says if it's not done, rebuilding risks undermining Palestinian self-determination and control.
Any amount of material and finance can be committed, but if you haven't remedied the fact that Israel contains the water, Israel controls the access, it controls the energy supply, the food, if you haven't got these basics aligned, then the rebuild and the recon will remain fractured, and the healthcare's ability to service this massive need will be limited and firing on half cylinders.
Gift of the Giver says it has set up field hospitals to assist with the dire need. It's also involved in the rebuilding of Al-Shifa Hospital. Founder Imtiaz Suleiman says the organization has 200 doctors waiting to enter Gaza as soon as possible.
It's going to be a collective effort from different NGOs, different governments all over the world. Right now, they need 16,000 surgical procedures, 10,000 urgent. 60,000 pregnant women need antenatal care. 70% of the children are unimmunized. 30,000 orphans need assistance. There's all kind of, and the figures are probably far worse than that. But as I said, teams are ready to go in and support from all over. Inside Egypt itself, we're looking after 200 families. We are looking after medical students. We're looking after students, people who have been injured inside, who need medical care and general care. We got 4,000 students in 6 private schools. After hours, we're paying 500 teachers to teach these 4,000 students so that when they go back, learning is not destroyed.
Other experts have called for a concerted effort by all sectors of society, including tertiary institutions, to actively participate in speaking out.
A university is a place of learning. It's a place which has the powerful responsibility of creating knowledge, of disseminating knowledge, of stimulating philosophical discussion. It should hold a moral compass on every issue. And if universities are to play that role in our society, they have to hold a position on things that are happening in the world. And for that reason, we needed to have an academic boycott against Israel.
Suleiman says the global rise of condemnation over the destruction in Gaza speaks to the issue being a question of humanity, not religion.
This is not for Palestine. This is for humanity. And that's why we need to get the whole world together, to stand together to make sure this does never, ever happen again. And like we're having meetings here, there's meetings like this all over the world where more and more humans are standing up to say never again.
Mariska Botha, SABC News, Cape Town.
You're watching the Weekend Review here on the SABC News channel. We'll be back with some of the biggest stories of the week at the top of the hour. Do stay with us. You're watching SABC News Live from Johannesburg. Your headlines this hour. Motorists are heading for a hefty petrol price increase next week. Preliminary data shows that the price of petrol will go up by between 84 and 90 cents per litre, depending on the grade.
4 of our members who are on what we call detached duty for Operation Valamkodi in Stilfontein have since been arrested.
4 SABC members have been arrested and appeared in court for the escape of alleged Stilfontein mining kingpin James Neo Tiger Chwaedi. The accused have been granted bail and will appear in court again in March.
Other countries charge us tariffs. We don't charge them tariffs, and it's about time that changes.
U.S. President Donald Trump says his country's 3 biggest partners, Canada, Mexico and China, cannot avoid Washington's trade tariffs. The tariffs take effect today. You're still watching Weekend Review live from our studios here in Johannesburg. You can participate, share your comments, or ask your own questions by giving us a call here in studio on 011-714-0680 or 81 or 82. It's an honor to have you with us at this hour. Now, motorists can expect a hefty fuel price increase next week. Preliminary data from the Central Energy Fund shows the price of petrol will likely go up by between 84 and 90 cents per litre, depending on the grade. This is expected to push the price of a litre of petrol in Gauteng and inland provinces to just under 22 rand 50 cents. Now, the price of a litre of diesel will likely go up by between 1 rand 3 cents and 1 rand 7 cents, depending on the grade. The price of paraffin is forecast to go up by about 98 cents per litre. The main drivers of the increases are a weaker rand and higher oil prices. The rise in fuel prices will likely push up consumer inflation, which will likely reduce room for further interest rate cuts going forward. The Department of Mineral Resources and Energy is expected to release the official fuel price adjustments, which will take effect on Wednesday. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump says his country's three biggest partners, Canada, Mexico and China, cannot avoid Washington's trade tariffs. These trade tariffs are expected to begin today. The White House says there will be an immediate tax of 25% of Canadian and Mexican imports and 10% on Chinese goods.
Other countries charge us tariffs. We don't charge them tariffs, and it's about time that that changes.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Saturday will implement 25% tariffs against Canada and Mexico and 10% on Chinese goods.
Tariffs don't cause inflation, they cause success. They cause big success. So we're going to have great success. There could be some temporary short-term disruption, and people will understand that.
Earlier, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau vowed a forceful response to any new U.S. tariffs.
We won't relent until tariffs are removed, and of course, everything is on the table.
Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has said Trump's tariffs would cost 400,000 U.S. jobs and drive up prices for American consumers. Trump's order and retaliatory tariffs from Canada and Mexico threaten to disrupt nearly $1.6 trillion in North American trade, as well as effectively end a 30-year free trade system that has deeply integrated the three economies. The largest sector by far to be affected by new tariffs would be autos and auto parts. Clark Packard of the Cato Institute explains.
The U.S., Mexico, and Canada have pretty tightly integrated supply chains. So the average car made in the U.S. or in the Mexico, Canada, U.S. zone tends to travel across borders up to 8 times. And so if you're imposing a tariff of 25% each time a part comes across the border, or if the whole automobile crosses the border, it's going to get pretty costly pretty quickly.
Mexico and Canada account for more than half of all auto parts exported to the United States. The new tariffs are expected to pressure the bottom line of major U.S. automakers that have plants in Mexico, like General Motors, ultimately raising prices of SUVs and pickup trucks for U.S. consumers. Economists warn the tariffs would also spark major increases in the price of imports, such as aluminum and lumber from Canada, and fruits, vegetables, beer, and electronics from Mexico.
Now, coming back home, 4 police officers believed to have been aided the so-called Stilfontein illegal mining kingpin, Neo Tsoaedi, have been arrested. This was revealed by the acting Northwest Police Commissioner, Major General Patrick Asaneng, during a media briefing in Stilfontein. Tsoaedi, who is popularly known as Tiger, escaped after being retrieved from underground at Shaft 11 in the area during the government-led retrieval operation.
The Operation Vala Umgodi, aimed at curbing illicit mining activities, started in 2023. While it is implemented in 7 provinces, Stilfontein highlighted intricacies of illegal mining. The operation led to the arrest of thousands of illegal miners, some alleged to be kingpins. James Neo Tsoaedi, known as Tiger, an alleged kingpin, escaped from police custody after resurfacing from Shaft 11 over 2 weeks ago.
This investigation was informed by the fact that we were confident that since the start of Operation Valamkoti and since illegal miners had been resurfacing from underground, whether assisted or on their own, we have never experienced an escape. So our investigation was premised on the belief that Tiger or the suspect could only have disappeared or escaped with the assistance of our members who were there on the day when he resurfaced.
4 police officers accused of aiding the escape.
Following this investigation, 4 of our members who are on what we call detached duty for Operation Valamkodi in Stilfontein have since been arrested, and they have been charged with 2 counts. The first count being that of defeating the cause of justice, and the second count being aiding a prisoner to escape. The 4 suspects have since appeared before the Stilfontein Magistrate Court, and they have since all 4 been granted bail of 1,000 rand.
Other illegal miners are still resurfacing at Margaret Shaft, which is few kilometers from Shaft 11, where government-led rescue operation was taking place.
We saw the beginning of this week at Margaret Shaft, 1 corpse being brought to the surface on the 27th. And then the following day, we saw 2 miners emerging from underground, and then yesterday 3, which brings the total to 5. They have indicated to us that there are some of their colleagues who are still underground, but we have also observed that these 5 miners, none of them came up showing signs of being emaciated, being hungry, which says then that there are still enough food underground.
The accused will appear in court again in March. Thabiso Moss, SABC News, Stilfontein.
You're still watching the Weekend Review here on the SABC News channel. We'll continue after this short break. Do stay with us.
Get in touch with SABC News. Call us if you have any news leads, stories, tip-offs, or simply issues you are grappling with as a community. Call us on 011-714-6133. Alternatively, email us at news@sabc.co.za. SABC News, your voice, independent and impartial.
What responsibility are you taking for the influx of Zimbabweans in this country and in other countries that are looking for jobs, that are looking for health care?
You are framing migration in a very negative perspective. And yet migration is not necessarily negative.
No, it's not. It's negative when it's illegal and it's uncontrollable. We get invaded. Do we actually have an SANDF that is capable and sufficiently resourced?
I can promise you that you can sleep peacefully. We will be able to defend the country. We have the capacity.
Without enough air support, without enough ships.
Exactly.
I was there in that meeting when they told him point blank that after the meeting he must announce that we are stopping the implementation of NHI.
Who told him that?
The Busa. This is in South Africa.
But who tells the president what to do?
Exactly.
Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. Now, opposition parties in the Rustenburg local municipality in the northwest have raised concern about the Rustenburg rapid transport system that is only partially operational. The parties say they are worried about the unfinished bus terminals and the delay in the completion of the project.
The Rustenburg local municipality approached local taxi operators last year. This resulted in the latter handing their minibus taxis over to the municipality. However, there seems to be unhappiness around the municipality not fulfilling its promise that it will compensate the taxi owners financially. The municipality has confirmed that some routes are operational, but opposition parties in the municipal council say they are concerned that some infrastructure remains incomplete.
He is concerned over the delay in the construction of bus stations on the R510 as well as the R104 that has been stuck over the past few years. And even though the bus system has been activated, the delays creates a low appetite for commuters to utilize the buses that we are seeing.
The EFF is calling for a probe into this project.
We are going to initiate a fully blown investigation into the monies that were spent in that area, into the project as well, the causes to the delays, and if there's any sabotage, whoever is behind that sabotage, whoever is behind, perpetuating that underdevelopment must be held accountable, whether from the municipality, whether third parties who are doing business as a form of service provider with the municipality. We are going to show that all the parties, all the interested parties in this particular instance are going to be held accountable.
The municipality has acknowledged that the project has been engulfed by controversy.
We have an agreement with the Department of Transport because we have not yet completed our bus terminals. Let the buses start operating, as we can see that our buses are operating. Though the stations are not yet complete, but our intention is that by the end of the year, we should have made progress. This project is long overdue.
At the time when this report was compiled, the affected taxi operators were not available for comment. Zebulon Maine, SABC News, Rustenburg.
Now, South African National Parks is still investigating the cause behind the charging and trampling of 59-year-old man Sheikh Adam Shabi Ahmed by an elephant near the park's Malelane gate. The grandfather's bid to save his grandson's life ended in tragedy within the vicinity of Kruger National Park when Ahmed's grandchildren, aged 5 and 11, were taking pictures and videos of an elephant that was inside the park, not far from the Malelane gate. The elephant then suddenly came charging towards them. To speak more about the latest on this incident, we are joined now by Sam Ferreira, who is St. Park's large mammal ecologist. Sam, thanks so much for joining us here on the program. Has there been any progress in the investigation to identify the elephant responsible for the attack?
Good afternoon to the listeners. Yes, thank you very much. Now, the investigation is still going on. Identifying the specific elephant is a really hard task. In that particular part where the unfortunate incident happened, we have got quite a large number of elephants, so it is actually nearly impossible to even identify that specific individual elephant that would have caused that damage.
And what steps are being taken to evaluate whether the elephant is aggressive and provoked, the incident? I know there's still that investigation underway, as you mentioned.
Look, that particular incident, I wouldn't, the investigation is under the way. But I think if one talk generally about elephant behavior, elephants, particularly if it is a breeding herd, which has got babies with them, will be very defensive of their young animals. And certainly if they perceive any threat, that elephant will certainly defend. And it doesn't necessarily mean the elephant is aggressive. The elephant is just doing naturally what every one of us do, and that is defend our young. And unfortunately, in this case, the gentleman lost his life when he was defending his own children. So I don't think we must think about an elephant that are specifically aggressive. Now, one of the things that does happen is when you have a case where you encounter elephants and you move very quickly towards elephants, they would perceive that as a threat. Whether that elephant is aggressive or not doesn't really matter. It's just a threat.
And Sam, just going back to the actual incident, was the problem with taking of the pictures of the animals, and what exactly is measured as too close proximity?
I don't exactly know what the incident is, the details of that, because, as I said, the investigation is still going on. But, any animal, and elephants in particular, if you approach an animal like that and you are entering their personal space, and probably for elephants, anything below 50 meters that you're away from an elephant, and even more, 100 meters, you are at risk, whether it is in your car or on foot. So I think that's a really important element. Very often, if an elephant enters your space, so even if the elephant willingly moving into your space, then it's typically not aggressive, and you're probably not going to have any fear. The accounts of this particular incident does suggest that the children and the unfortunate gentleman were probably moving into a space that made this elephant very uncomfortable, and then of course it went into defensive mode.
And without assigning blame here, Sam, in this incident, while the children and grandfather were fleeing the charging animal, the 11-year-old boy fell down, which is when the elephant reportedly attacked the boy's legs with its trunk as he lay on the ground. Is there an ideal way to react to such a situation?
So I think that's an important question. One actually have to ask herself, if there are so many people traveling around in Kruger every year, there are elephants, there are people going on game walks, etc. Why don't we have so many? Why don't we have many, many more of these unfortunate incidences? And one of the things is how one behaves. So if you do find yourself in a situation like that, you're probably better off to really, well, first of all, stop. If you're in a group, stay in a group together. Don't anybody take off and one person run. The elephant is probably going to follow that person, and then slowly move backwards out of that critical distance where the elephant is feeling unsafe. So I think that's a very important element, and of course that's really difficult because most of us will have our innate nature will be to run like hell. So I think that's really, really important that keeping your mind when you are in this danger with any of these big animals. Very typically, actually running away is not the best way. It's actually slowly walking back and removing yourself out of that distance. And what also happens is it gives the elephant also a chance to feel like, oh, okay, this is not necessarily such big danger, and the elephant itself can back up as well.
And just still on that, I mean, I would love for you to sort of expand on that, Sam. I mean, is there a way of acting and reacting to protect yourself against a charging animal? And is it even possible to avoid being trampled on?
Oh, if you get to a situation that you now do have an elephant that is feeling uncomfortable and is going to go into a charge mode, so yes, the rangers, etc., will have lots of experience when they walk in the field to read the body language, and that's quite difficult with an elephant. It can be very unpredictable. All animals are unpredictable. But what does often happen is that if an elephant decides to challenge you, is not to scream at high volume or high pitched screams. It's actually better to talk in a deep voice and clap your hands. It more often than not may stop it. It may not always stop it, but I think that's a really important one. The other important element is if you have an option when an elephant is changing you, is to try and get at least a tree or a branch or something between you and the charging elephant. Very often when that happens, they would come and they could ride up to that particular tree and they will back off then and so forth. They may throw a bit of sand at you or something like that. So I think those are some of the really important ones. But generally in Kruger, I'm always amazed at how well we don't have far more incidences, and that is partly because I think people do respect elephants very, very much in the park.
And are these incidents a common occurrence?
Not at all. We don't have this kind of unfortunate death of somebody in Kruger a lot. We do have cases, of course, when people are driving their vehicles, where and with a vehicle you tend to have a little bit more courage yourself, and you tend to then often get into the space of elephants, that distance that we talked a bit about. So there are some guidelines on what one should think a little bit about when you're driving and encountering elephants. The most important guideline is respect the space that the elephants need. Be careful as soon as you get in anywhere within 100 meters of an elephant.
And Sam, you might be aware of this story. I mean, last July, a Spanish man was killed after getting out of his vehicle to take pictures of a breeding herd with 3 calves in the Pilanesberg National Park in the northwest. In your view, from your assessment, would you say people often ignore directives that doing this agitates wildlife?
So I think that's a good example, and I'm not entirely sure that it's just about people ignoring rules. As I said to you before, I think the fact that we've got such low incidences mean people are respecting elephants and the rules. But one of the effects that does happen, and it's often the case with foreign visitors, their experience with big animals are embedded in whatever they might have experienced in zoos that they went to. And of course, zoo animals are very used to people. There's usually some sort of barrier between you and so forth. And I think in that particular case, there is a potential that this kind of perception that overseas people have when they travel around, is that animals are actually docile, like what they've experienced in zoos, then place them in danger. So I think it is really important that as authorities, we do make people aware that wild animals are wild, and the best thing that I can predict you that they're going to do something unpredictable.
Yeah, quite interesting point, Sam. Now, SANParks launched Vision 2040 last year, and the idea around reimagined conservations speaks about mega living landscapes and the role that people can play in biodiversity and harmonious living with animals. Could you please expand more on that?
So I think what really is important to realize that all of us are very much dependent on biological aspects to survive, whether it's carrots that we are eating or whether it is the fresh air that we are breathing. And that realization has made it really important that people's well-being or human well-being, our South African well-being is very much dependent on our nature's well-being. But nature is not just inside the national park. If you are anywhere outside the national park, there are little rivers running, there are birds flying around, there are reeds growing and wetlands and so forth. So yes, these things are all busy doing things for us. So the idea of living landscapes is that you actually realize this, whatever you're doing in the landscape, whether you're a farmer, whether you are a game ranger, whatever the case might be, is that we are dependent on each other. Now, what this does mean is that we know that big animals like elephants are not necessarily going to follow the rules. They don't read our management plans very well. So yes, they're going to be walking around, often outside the park. And of course, when you're successful in doing this kind of work, you're going to have more people coming into contact with some of these dangerous animals. And one of the most important things is that we as society, we actually co-develop how we would like to respond when an elephant or a lion or something else decides to go for a walkabout outside the national park. If we then implement that, we then also want to, and quite often, for safety reasons, for the animal as well as even for people, it is about, I actually probably going to end up having to kill that animal. And when that does happen, what happens to that carcass? Who benefits from it, etc.? And I think those are really important things for us as South Africans to recognize that we as a collective have got an important role to achieve these living landscapes which benefit both us and nature.
Sam, thanks so much for those insights. We appreciate that. That was Sam Ferreira, who is SANParks' large mammal ecologist. Do stay with us. The Weekend Review continues after this short break. Welcome back. The Khoisan fraternity in the Nelson Mandela Metro and around the country are expected to come out in numbers to pay their respect to their late beloved Khoisan SA Queen, Cynthia Treachard. Treachard died in a car accident. Khoisan community has described her as someone who was very passionate about fighting for the equal representation of the Khoisan in all spheres of government. SABC News reporter Lerato Fekisi is at the funeral service.
We're broadcasting outside the church where Queen Cynthia is going to be having her final celebration of her life and also her final send-off. It promises to be a somber occasion. The Khoi and San community is reeling and still very much aggrieved by the loss of Queen Cynthia. Grateful that the king has survived, but so sad that they've lost someone who was a real activist, passionate about ensuring that the Khoi San have got representation in all fields of government, passionate to make sure that the Khoi San are recognized as true leaders, like the Nguni and Zulu leaders we've had in the country. But a man who has walked this journey with her, who has walked the activism journey for such a long time for the Khoi and San, is Mr. Christian Martin, an activist for the Khoi and San, and he joins me this morning to give us briefly the sentiments of the Khoi and San during what is really a tragic time for them. Mr. Martin, I think the best place to start perhaps is to ask how first the king is doing. I understand that he was also involved in the accident. He survived. How is he doing, especially health-wise, and will we see him at the funeral today?
I can thank you first, Lerato, for the opportunity that you guys and the interest that you always have towards us as Khoi and San. I just wanted to say the king is actually at home. He's recovering, I can say, fairly well. There's a little bit of his pelvis that were cracked in the whole accident situation, but he will be here today, is to make sure that his queen is buried in the dignified way that it's supposed to be. And while saying that about the dignified, we want to be grateful towards the Eastern Cape government, especially the Premier, Oscar Mobiane, that made sure that our queen will be buried today dignified. As you could have seen, the procession that passed now, that is like the queens of England or wherever, same difference. And we want to be grateful towards the Premier for doing that for us. So there's many other people that came on board and have done a lot towards making this funeral a possibility. The Khoi Sans are from far, they came. There's people from the Western Cape, there's people from Gauteng, there's people from Oudtshoorn, there's people from the Free State. Some of the SACC, SAKK people just arrived now here. There's dignitaries that we can expect here today from Parliament that is going to be around here. So for us, this is a great moment, yes, a sad moment, and that is so important. And I just need to say that, we're really going to miss our queen. The reason for that is she was one that was in the forefront. She was not like other leaders that fought from behind and give orders. She was literally in the forefront. For her, she was part of this accident on her route to the Union Building because of an eviction notice that they received, and they wanted to go stand against the eviction notice. And therefore, we don't want to say the one against the other, but it happened in that sequence.
Mr. Martin, just to speak about that eviction notice, she dies at a crucial time, you would say, when they were going to be evicted. The eviction notice had been served, but they had stood outside the headquarters in Pretoria, parliamentary-wise, protesting and standing up against what they felt was a poor representation of the Khoi San, the language itself, poor representation of the Khoi San within all structures of government, and also she was against the loosely used word of colours, which the Khoi San had been fighting against. So how bad of a death is this when you look at the work she was so on the front for, and also thinking perhaps what impact it has then on the fight that the Khoi San continue to have?
Thank you, Lerato, for that. Looking at what she stood for and why she literally went for 7 years staying with the king at the Union Building. Lerato, let me first say this is a woman not found in the sense of she left her comfort to go and be with her husband at the Union Building. That child matriculated now in the area. So if you look at all the sacrifices she have made, one, it was against this terminology of being called colored. She never had a problem with people wanting to be called colored, but she had a problem that we should also fall under a loose terminology referring to the colored people. Two, it was the land question. The land question was very important for her because that is what the Khoi and San as indigenous people and as African people, we know the worth of land that was taken away from us. I usually say, those that knows me, that knows that I always say that a chief without land is like a rhino without a horn. It is abnormal, unnatural for a rhino not to have a horn at some point in time. So, and then the other one was the question of the recognition of of the chiefs of the Khoi San. Yes, we are aware that there's a bill, Act number 3 of 2019. You understand, the Traditional Khoi San Act. We know there's that act, but we still feel outside the House of Traditional Leaders in Bisho and all over the country is being called the Traditional Khoi San Leaders House, but we are not part of it. Decisions are being taken. Just take this fact now of land expropriation without compensation. We are not part of the discussion. It can never be that those that are the first inhabitants are not part of the same land that we invited. The irony, Lerato, is that there was a time when the Ngunis came from the north. Who welcomed them? If you yourself have to give me now your Nzduko, the Khoi San will feature there as a Batwa and something in most of the people. Nelson Mandela have a Khoi San lineage, Desmond Tutu, even a person like the clerk, Kruger, Jan Smuts, they have Kretua Eva's lineage in them. But today, as the elders of the elders, we are nowhere. All that we are asking, consider us. And as I've said, when the Nguni came from the north, we welcomed them nyan with open hands. When the Europeans came from the sea with the 3 ships, we welcomed them. Today, we are the people standing as beggars in the country. You know, as to say, acknowledge us. How can we ask for acknowledgement? How can we ask for land? How can we plead to be part of what is supposed to be natural occurrence? And then I just need to say something that the Queen was also specific of. You see, the challenge that we have is, we are no man and we have no land. When I say we are no man, Lerato, if you look at the terminology African only means Ngunis. If you look at the terminology black is African, Indian, colored, and Chinese. There's no Khoi, so we are nobody in this country. We are fighting now to say is that we should form part of the African part, the definition of African. That is where we are supposed to be part in.
Then lastly, Mr. Martin, in honor of her, especially for someone that you said stood for so much, sacrificing her life, leaving her children all the way to Union Buildings, what is your dedication or your promise to her as the Khoi San in remembrance of her to make sure that her legacy never dies?
Ma'am, number one, this message must be sent out. You know, there were 2 people that wrote beautiful songs now about the Queen. I'm going to send it to you. The most beautiful songs in her honor. That is just the songs. The other thing that we're going to do is we want this place here where the Queen is going to be buried to be declared a heritage site. You understand? I always say that the Khoi San have the half of nothing. Now, Lerato, it talks by itself. When it comes to a footprint in the Nelson Mandela Metro in Kabega, the only footprint we have is the airport, the Chief David Stearman Airport. How beautiful would it be that the next one, when tourists come from the airport, they pass here. This church, you can see, in 1803, this church was... It's more than 200 years old. There's a lot of history here, and that is the footprint in the honor. The tourists must know, the world must know, that lady have fought a battle like the likes of the Winnie Mandelas, like the likes of many other people, the Lillian Diedrichs, she have fought that battle. We must honor. Lillian Ngoyi, she fought that battle. We must honor as such.
Thank you so much. Well, that was an activist of the Khoi San, Mr. Christian Martin, passionate, saying that the Khoi San nation is grieving the loss of Queen Cynthia, saying that she was someone who sacrificed a lot. She left her family in Port Elizabeth, moved the Union Buildings for 7 years, outside, sleeping there, camping there, and not fighting for herself, but fighting for what he says representation of the Khoi San among the traditional leaders that we have in South Africa, representation of the Khoi San among leadership structures within government, also fighting against the loosely used words of Khalid's, saying that she had no problem with people that wanted to be referred as as Khalid, but saying that her specifically, it mustn't be a thing that is normalized that they be referred to as Khalid. So saying that also in her honor, they would like the area where we are in the church, which is going to be buried, to be named in her honor, and to be a museum where people can come from far and wide to come and remember this remarkable woman who fought for the rights of the Khoi San up until her last breath.
Ratifikisi there. Thanks so much indeed. Now, thousands of students in private accommodation across the country are facing eviction this weekend. This comes after the National Student Financial Aid Scheme's failure to pay debts of millions of rents owed to the Private Student Housing Association and other independent student accommodation landlords. Last week, the association confirmed that NSFAS owes them 44 million rand and the amount could be higher. The association has given NSFAS 14 days to pay the debt or the students will face eviction. SABC News reporter Patricia Visachi is on the story.
With the 2025 academic year about to start at many institutions of higher learning across the country, of course, many students are looking for accommodation, and this particular weekend is very crucial as students across the country are actually gearing up to the various areas, residents where they found space, but others are still in the dark. Their future hangs in the balance, and many of it is linked to NSFAS delays, whether they have received funding or not, some of the applications that are pending and others that are just partially funded, of course, leaving a lot of students anxious, others not knowing whether they will have accommodation, in particular in the private student housing sector, whether they will be accommodated. I'm joined here by a student who has been provisionally funded. Just tell us about your journey and how that affects you.
Okay, so I was professionally funded by NSFAS, but when I had to register at Varsity, there was a financial hold and I couldn't register because NSFAS had not given the Varsity money. So my mother had to take a loan of 20,000 and I had to pay 10,000 to register. And then I came here for student funding. I came about last week and I stay in Joburg. I had nowhere to stay here in Pretoria. Then we did the application process. Fortunately, they say they take in professionally funded students, and then I have to pay a top-up fee. Then my mother has to pay for it.
How has that affected your family? Perhaps pressure on your mother?
Yeah, my mother was really stressed a lot because she was scared that the cost might be full, the resident might be full. So she had to stress a lot to get the money.
How are you feeling?
Well, now that they took me here, I'm feeling better, but I just feel sorry for my mother because she has to pay the money again. Yeah.
All right, let's turn to a student who went through the similar process perhaps a while back, and how exactly she overcame it. How were you affected?
Hi, my name is Adobe Nobi and I have been funded by NSFAS for 3 years now. So in my first year, I was funded by NSFAS and we had to pay top up, but there was a hold on NSFAS, so I had to wait for a few weeks before the hold was removed before I could register or just sign up to live at one of the student life accommodations. But to be honest, my run with NSFAS has been smooth. The only thing I can complain about is late payments in terms of allowances, because I think in 2023, if I'm not mistaken, during the month of November, which is exam season, I did not receive my allowance. So it was stressful because I am studying and on the side I am hungry and I'm stressing. I'm not even sure if I am going to get my student allowance, but to be honest, I did not get it. So I had to rely on my parents to give me some money for that month.
Obviously, your parents stepped in, but I'm sure you, as a student, hear the testimonies of other students. It's student life, it's an ecosystem. People do share what their experiences are. Those who do not have that support from parents, guardians, from what you have heard, what do they do in a situation where NSFAS simply does not release the funds?
Based on what I've heard so far from some of the students that live here in the building, some of them sometimes keep quiet. They do not speak out. Sometimes we hear of students who leave the building because they have been defunded, which is not easy to deal with, honestly, but we try on our side to get them comfortable, to provide what they need at that time. Sometimes we do offer a few groceries to some students who speak out and do tell us that, you know what, I do not have something to eat this month, and we try our best to give them the best support that they can get.
What's your advice to other students A lot of first here. I can see the anxiety, the uncertainty. You've gone through this, you managed, and it seems like you are fine and you are strong. I don't know what other challenges you might be facing, but if you could give positive advice to those who might find themselves challenged and stressed at this time of the year.
Guys, I have a few people that I do know of that currently are not accepted into any university, but I just want to say that, guys, have hope. It's not over. Yeah, man, and for those who have been accepted into university, it's about to be a fun year. It's going to be exciting, so I do hope that you guys have the best year at whatever student accommodation that you are at. And honestly, guys, you have your student life, so rely on them. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Yeah, man, so shout out to every single one of you that have been accepted. And to those who haven't, don't lose hope.
All right, some positivity there, but we keep to the challenges that the students are facing. I'm now speaking to one of the private student accommodation representatives, Rowan. Tell us about what happens when there's uncertainty and perhaps students do not know whether they will get the funding, those who have been partially funded or so. What happens? What are the logistics that admin faces and how do you handle that?
Yeah. So thanks for that, Patricia. I mean, on our side, what we generally do is when we get the status of a provisionally funded student, we accept the agreement based off of that. So we take it as the student will be funded and we will allow the student to move in. They just need to then pay that supplemental amount and they are welcome to then move into the property. And obviously from that point onwards, that is when NSFAS will then update their statuses at a later point. So there is a slight delay when it comes to that in terms of, and I guess that's where the uncertainty comes from for the students, is because they're provisionally funded, but they don't necessarily know, am I funded? Because their status does take a bit of time to actually update.
Do you ever find yourself in a situation where you're housing a student whose funding application has been completely rejected and perhaps due to admin glitches, you're not aware of that and you find out later? What happens in a situation like that?
So in a situation like that, I mean, with the agreement that the students sign, it's essentially just if your funding is revoked or if, for any example, you don't get that final funding, that is when the lease agreement either changes to private or we give a grace period for that student to find another residence or relocate.
But they still have to pay for that duration that they lived here?
Yes. Yes.
So you can see there, it is not as simple as it may seem. For a lot of students here who are facing uncertainty, the pressure mounts and it mounts. And hence, many of them appeal to NSFAS to do the right thing, to make sure that those applications are processed as speedily as possible. We've heard the horror stories that often comes out when students do not get the money. Students who find themselves living on the streets and having to, have their desperation and their vulnerability exploited as, of course, they're trying to find accommodation. In particular, those who come from far-flung areas, rural areas, as far as KZN, Eastern Cape, and so forth, who do not know life in the big city, who do not have support systems here. They find themselves extremely vulnerable, and then they resort to dangerous means to survive in these areas. Women, as we know, gender-based violence being a very serious issue in South Africa, them also being exploited as they try to navigate and wait for their applications to be processed. So it's a huge conundrum. We're waiting to see what happens now that we know that the Private Student Accommodation Association plans to evict a lot of students perhaps in coming days if that 44 million rand that is outstanding is still not paid. We hope to see whether maybe NSFAS will come to the table and pay that money, or whether we will sit with a crisis this coming week of students who might find themselves on the streets and having to make alternative means.
My colleague Patricia Visache there. Thanks for that reporting. Now, the Kimberley Diamond Cup skateboarding Grand Slams with the coveted prize money of 100,000 rand is currently underway. Participants from 5 provinces where the sport is popular and where provincial Grand Slams were held are in Kimberley, hoping to walk away with the money and honor. Some participants are also from SADC countries. Karabo Sioko is on the story.
We are at the Kimberley Diamond Cup right now, where a skateboarding event is taking place. So now this is just the Grand Slams, and they've been happening across different provinces. The KDC team have been at Port Elizabeth and Gauteng to find the best skaters. And here right now, this is just an elimination process to find the best, and then they will compete again on the Grand Apex event that's going to take place in March 21st and 22nd. The event is also sponsored by the Department of Economic Development and Tourism. But just to tell us more about the event from the department side, we have Sipho Mampi. Good afternoon, thank you very much for joining us today.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Just tell us more about this competition, since that it's the department's baby and also it's the department that is sponsoring it.
The Department of Economic Development is funding this whole project. We are now in the series of the Grand Slams. We have started in Port Elizabeth, we went to Johannesburg, on the 8th we will be in Bloemfontein, and on the 15th we will be in Durban, and on the 1st we will be rounding off the Grand Slam. The Grand Slam, its purpose is mainly as an elimination round for an Apex event that will take place in March from the 21st to the 22nd, where all the skaters of March, where all the skaters that have won in all the provinces will converge here to come and compete for the major prize.
And talking about skateboarding, it's quite popular in the province, our province, and also our province being an extreme sport destination. We know that this event has been taking place for years, but then at some point it stopped a little bit. So can you tell us more about how is the department planning to improve this event that's happening right now and to make sure that this sport is kept alive?
The intention of the department is to ensure that this venue becomes a world venue for international events, which means that it must become a qualifying venue for Olympic sports. Also, the KDC event, we also want to make sure that it gets points from the World Skate so that skaters throughout the world can come and skate here to gain points for the Olympic sports. But this sport has gained international interest. We have interest from Uganda, from Malawi, from Mozambique, and from other parts of the country as well, international. So our intention is to take it back to its glory, where it will be an international event, where you will have international skaters coming to skate in this park.
And at the specific Grand Slams, how many participants do we have and what are the categories?
The participants that we are having in this Grand Slams are 80. And the categories is for girls and for boys under 18, and for girls and for boys adults above 16. That is what we are looking for.
And I think those who impress those who are skating today, what is the grand prize for those that will be winning?
The grand prize is in the region of 100,000 with different categories. So everybody is vying for that, and let the best person win, the best skater win at the end of the day.
Thank you very much. That was Sipho Mampi from the Department of Economic Development and Tourism. Just to mention, this event also has SADC countries, people from SADC countries that have come all the way just to be part of this extreme sport. And here with me, I have Noel Kosa, who's all the way from Mozambique. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Just tell us your journey from coming to Mozambique and also being here.
Okay. Hello, I'm Noel Kosa. I'm come from Mozambique. I'm here for the competition, the KDC competition.
And also this must show that you have passion into the sports for you to travel all the way. Can you tell us how was the journey and how long have you been skating?
My trip was not easy, but I made it. And I've been skating for 12 years. And I'm proud of to be here to skate and compete and see if I can get some to help in home.
Okay, and are you vying for the ultimate prize?
Sorry?
Are you willing to get the ultimate prize?
Yeah, I will do my best for that. I need to do something because my trip was so difficult, but I made it, and I want to appreciate that because I love skate also. and portray.
Thank you very much and all the best. There you have it from the Department of Economic Development, that the grand prize is within the price of 100,000 rand, and these skaters that are just behind me will be doing their best, showing their best tricks to make sure that they get the prize. And also just one of the skaters is all the way from Mozambique who said he raised funds to get to Kimberley just to come and show his skills and the passion that he has for sports. For now, it's back to studio.
Well, and that's it for today. Thanks so much for joining us. Join us again tomorrow on the week ahead at 12 p.m. right here on the SABC News channel. Up next is SA Today with local and international news from myself, Marajita Matlabe, as well as the rest of the Weekend Review team. Thanks so much indeed for watching. You take care.